Fellas, we gotta talk about Bryce Young. The news came out after the Chargers game. He's benched. Andy Dalton will now be starting for the Carolina Panthers in week 3. It's been tough for Bryce Young. As a starter, he's 2-16 in his career in the NFL. Look, two things could be true. Bryce Young hasn't been playing particularly well as the number 1 overall pick. And remember, but at the same time, this is on the Carolina Panthers as an organization, because for those who want to say Bryce Young, and I was listening to Stephen A. Smith on ESPN First Take, and he talked about Jamarcus Russell becoming a bigger bust than Jamarcus Russell. I think that's more on the Carolina Panthers organization, because you look at Baker Mayfield, you look at Sam Darnold, they were there. And guess what? They're able to go elsewhere and thrive. I think with Bryce Young, and I thought about this, Carolina should consider trading him. And I would like to see him in a team, Pittsburgh or Miami, because we talked about Tua last week on the show, and none of us want to see Tua back on that field, considering his durability history. I think that the Carolina Panthers should consider a trade for Tua, consider something for Bryce Young. Trade him, help him go elsewhere. The biggest problem with the Carolina Panthers has been the owner, David Tepper, because look at some of the moves, look at some of the records. I mean, he was supposed to be there to replace Jerry Richardson, and so far it's been absolutely atrocious. And shout out to our guy Harrison. Anyone who knows Harrison, he's a diehard Carolina Panthers fan. But at the same time, again, Bryce Young, it always goes back to the 2023 NFL draft. Him or CJ Stroud. Yes, CJ Stroud is thriving in Houston. I've said he was the best quarterback coming out of that draft. I think for Bryce Young, I don't think he's a bust, but I do think he needs to go elsewhere to resurrect his career. But Grant, I'm gonna let you go first. What were your thoughts about the Carolina Panthers benching Bryce Young? I think this was a good move on their part, because I think Bryce Young's confidence at this point is gone. And I think Andy Dalton there to step in and play, I think it'll help out, give Bryce Young some time to reevaluate some things and help him mature and grow. What do you think about the decision to bench Bryce Young?
Well, look, PSP, honestly, coming from my perspective, I kind of knew they were going to go down this route. I think you're going to get to a point with a lot of people were surprised by it. Me personally, I wasn't, because I felt like this was a move that was coming. But my biggest thing is I see a lot of the narrative around this move is going around Bryce Young. And again, I think more it's the organizational issue with the Panthers. When Bryce Young was drafted, this team didn't really have a strong setup for him to work with. In my opinion, the only offensive weapon that he had that was going to be of some sort of usage to him was Adam Thielen. And after that, the rest of the season went to the dumps. David Tepper's fighting people at bars. Their stadiums are completely empty. They go into this season, it's the exact same. And I look at this more on a bigger level. One of my biggest issues with the NFL is when you take a guy straight out of college, like a 21, 22-year-old guy, and you place him in a position like that. If you have nothing for him to work with, how do you expect him to succeed? And I still look, Bryce Young is an amazing guy. In college, he was a great quarterback. But looking at what Carolina has been doing and the structure they have set up, it really didn't give him a lot to work with. And look, I'm not trying to excuse that for Bryce Young's play. It's been horrible. He has not played at the level that he needs to. I'm not trying to hold this off as an excuse. But when I look at what I'm seeing right now from Carolina, they have nothing built up for this team to succeed. And it's like you expect any guy to go into that room and work perfectly. I don't even think if you put CJ Stroud in that room right now in Carolina, if they took him, I don't think he would have been able to do a ton. In Houston, they had solid weapons. They got Tate Dell. They had Nico Collins. They had these other players on that roster that gave him a route where it was like, even if he didn't have that great season, if he went even above par, people could say, okay, it's fine. But we saw what happened when he had weapons. He had one of the best offensive seasons from a rookie we've seen in the past 10 years. Meanwhile, when you look at Bryce Young, they've given him nothing and they throw him out there and be like, you'll be fine. Just get us a 10-win season. And everyone was calling off his head last year. 2 games, I think 3 or 3 games, everyone was calling for his head. And this, again, is the issue I have. You can't expect to give somebody that's like if you ask me to build a Lego set and you give me the box and there's nothing in there. Like, how do you expect me to build it if you're giving me nothing? And so I'm not trying to excuse Bryce Young's play. He's been horrible. And I know Andy Dalton's going to come in, but I don't know really what else is left to say. They're probably going to go losing. This is going to be the worst team in the league, in my opinion. The offense isn't able to get anything going. The defense, pass rush, secondary is garbage. I can say that from my perspective. I watched that Saints game. It was awful. And at the end of the day, as much as I want to feel for Bryce, we want to put this blame on Bryce Young. We got to understand that expecting these quarterbacks to succeed in such dire conditions never works for the people in the end. And it's unfortunate for Bryce, but right now in my position, the Carolina Panthers are probably going to end up being rock bottom, and I don't think all the blame should be put on Bryce Young.
Well, you make a very valid point, Grant. And like I said before, the organization, the ownership, it comes down to, and I just think with Carolina, they have a lot of work to do, especially with the organization, because until they do something, I don't know what's going to happen. But that's what happened. As Champ always says all the time, quarterback can't throw behind his back. Bryce Young is not the biggest quarterback in the world. He's listed at 5'10", 204. I don't even think if you put Patrick Mahomes under these types of circumstances, he will succeed, because I just don't think the Carolina Panthers, they have nothing to look forward to. But we'll discuss that later on. But BRF, what are your thoughts about the Panthers benching Bryce Young?
I mean, it kind of got to piggyback off of what Grant said, man. I think this was a move a lot of people really saw coming, and I mean, you do have to feel for you. Like, I mean, you do got to feel for him because he's not exactly like the Carolina Panthers aren't exactly laden with talent, but in some situations that have been kind of like similarly bad, some quarterbacks have at least shown flashes. You know, like you take like a Justin Fields in Chicago. He like I think a D Man was actually talking about it on one of the podcasts. I'm gonna give a shout out to D Man. Justin Fields at least showed some flashes with the Chicago Bears before, they ultimately traded him because they felt like he wasn't the answer. Like, there have been rookie quarterbacks that have at least shown flashes. Bryce Young never did that. Never did that. Even in the games they won, it almost felt like the opposing team gave it to them. Like they didn't like what they could win. It's like they didn't take it. Like they didn't like go get it. Like the opposing team kind of just gave it to them in a way. So he still wasn't even really like popping off of the screen every so often. Like he showed like his was more like a glimpse here and there. Like he make a he'll make a play running, and make a play with his legs, or he'll kind of escape the pocket, prolong a play, but like nothing like no standout games really for him. So but honestly, I think I think ultimately it does go back to the organizational structure of the Carolina Panthers and how they run it, because they are the worst. Right now they are the worst run franchise in the NFL. I mean, their owner's a joke. I mean, their front office is like they don't have a clue what they're doing. And the thing is, they actually went out and they tried to do something. They actually improved their offensive line. They actually went out and got Deontay Johnson from Pittsburgh. They drafted Jatavian Sanders, who's one of the best tight ends coming out in college. I mean, they drafted Jonathan Brooks, even though he's coming off of an injury. I mean, they tried to do stuff. It's just that it's like the morale is shot. It's like the team is just like going through the motions, and it's just like they're not good. It's like the collection as a whole just isn't clicking, and when that happens for a team, it's hard for you to win games because there's no camaraderie, there's no chemistry, there's nothing built up that you can take from game to game. It's like there's no silver linings with this team, like from game to game. It's like nothing they do right now is something they can take from a previous game, build on it, and try to get better. So it's like where do you go? And I think a lot of people definitely saw the benching coming. Now, me personally, I hear people saying, "Oh, sit him down, let him develop." Da da da. No, in my opinion, he's finished there. You can't go back to him now. You can't. Because and that's how I feel like him, and that's what I feel like with most situations when you have a guy and you start him like right off the bat as a rookie. If he struggles and then he gets to that point, like maybe second, third year, and he still hasn't really improved much, the second you bench him is done. Once you bench him, it's done because you're basically you put the weight of the franchise on his shoulders. The minute you say you're not good enough to be a starting quarterback, he got to go. He got to go. And I've seen reports saying Carolina's not going to trade him in the offseason. Y'all better backtrack. Y'all need to backtrack. Y'all need to take all that back, and you need to look and see what you can get for him. You have to go in another direction. You can't save it at this point. You cannot save it. He's done there. So if I'm Carolina, I backtrack. I may come out and say we're not trading him. I'm taking phone calls. See if you can get at least do that. See if you can get some draft capital for him. Like I saw a proposed trade, which actually is actually it was actually kind of interesting. It was a 3-team proposed trade between the Rams, Dolphins, and Panthers, where the Rams get Bryce, the Dolphins get Matthew Stafford, and then the Panthers get the Dolphins second and the Rams third.
I can see that
interesting.
That would be nice.
I like that from the standpoint of the Rams are now officially in rebuild mode. So in my opinion, it's almost like it's bad when you have, like, if you're the LA Rams and you have that one game against the Arizona Cardinals and the Arizona Cardinals beat you so bad. Matthew Stafford is now officially on the trading block, according to a lot of media heads. That is bad. But it's because Puka Nacua is hurt. Cooper Kupp is hurt. They're both on IR. So basically your two best wide receivers.
And hey, you give Matthew Stafford some weapons and Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, and plus he can actually compete in that division with Allen and Rodgers.
Let me tell you something. If they were to swing that and the Miami Dolphins were to get Matthew Stafford, in my opinion, they jump to the top of the AFC East just off of that offense alone. Because Matthew Stafford, for me, is the quarterback that the Miami Dolphins would absolutely love, because even at this stage of his career, he still has one of the elite arms in the National Football League. And you're giving him Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle to throw the ball to on a weekly basis. It's almost like the Patrick Mahomes situation in Kansas City, having Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. The man can't overthrow him. He can't overthrow him. You could run
a running game with Mostert as well too.
Oh, with Mostert in that chain. Oh my, bruh. I'm just saying it, because most proposed trades are like, what the hell are we talking about? This one actually is a good trade. I like it. But going back to Bryce, I don't know. I feel for him because I felt like the Carolina Panthers they put him in a no-win situation. And I think what really got the ball rolling was when they traded DJ Moore. When they traded DJ Moore, that's when you look and you're just like, you're going to draft Bryce Young and you're going to trade his best offensive weapon? What are we doing? Like, what are we doing? And don't get me wrong, Adam Thielen is still he's still a decent wide receiver. He's still a decent route runner. He's still got hands, but he's not what he was in his prime in Minnesota. I mean, it's safe to say. So I don't know, man. It's just, I think you have to take calls for him. Like at this point going into the offseason, I don't think the relationship. if the Carolina Panthers somehow were able to rebuild that relationship and he became the starting quarterback again, this would be the first time in a long time you could give the Carolina Panthers coaching staff and the front office kudos for trying to find a way to rebuild his confidence. But at this point, I think you have to take calls and I think you have to look into trading him at this point. But I feel for him because I don't know. I think he just needs to be in a situation where he's got adequate talent around him because even when you look at him in Alabama was stacked. I mean, they were stacked. They had NFL talent galore on the offensive side of the ball. So all he had to do was just come in, manage the game, and he was going to be fine. Just so happened he was actually a really good college quarterback. So I think he just needs to be in a situation with adequate to good talent and just kind of see where it is. Carolina really did nothing for him on the talent management standpoint, but at the same time, he showed no flashes as to showing everybody that he can be a capable starting quarterback in the National League. I just feel like the relationship's over at this point. They need to look into trying to trade him.
Yeah. And some would also argue with Bryce Young. Have we seen a pattern? Because with Alabama quarterbacks, Mac Jones, Bryce Young, Tua Tagovailoa, now people are going to make that argument. How are Alabama quarterbacks that have come into the NFL haven't panned out so well? But undisputed world champ, saving the best for last. What is your reaction?
I'm going to be real careful about what I'm going to say because we all on the air. It is sad for the fans of Carolina considering one thing, and you know this to be true, BRF, because they're the same division. Considering how the last regime ended in Carolina, you did not think that it could go from bad to worse.
That's a fair point.
That's a fair point. Yes, sir.
Or worse.
Well, I mean, it went left quick. It got bad quick. Considering, like I said, let me word this correctly. Considering the circumstances that the last regime was in that ousted, Mr. Richardson out of ownership. Considering that, people thought that David Tepper was going to be a lot better for this because, he came from Pittsburgh. And anytime somebody comes from Pittsburgh, there's a little bit of football culture that comes from there, from coaching to a little bit of everywhere. Guys that come from Pittsburgh are scattered throughout the league. You see him, Jordan Porter, just to name a few. And these guys are good culture guys. You know what I'm saying? So to see that happen and to see guys, owners of a team throwing drinks on people in the stands is flat out ridiculous. That's number one. And it all flows down from the top. I would equate, look, since he's been in power, there's been several different quarterbacks. There's been several different coaches. And I'm on record for saying this. They remind me, this Carolina franchise really reminds me of the Cincinnati Bengals in the 90s. No coaching stability, no quarterback stability, first round washouts. It's just bad. Not to mention, they traded some of their best players and literally got nothing for them. They traded Christian McCaffrey for a second and a fifth. How does that happen? I want you to tell me who in that building went somewhere and did something crazy, because who got drunk and made that trade? Because I just want to know, how do you get rid of Christian McCaffrey for a second and a fifth? Then turned around. Remember, a year before Brian Burns got traded, a team offered 3 first-round picks in order to get him.
He said no.
And he said, no, Brian Burns is not going anywhere. He's not going anywhere. He's going to be a Panther for life. Got rid of him this past offseason. You only got,
this was just dumb.
He went
and then on top of that, it wasn't the trade itself. It was the fact that you did not have anything there. You had nothing there.
No.
And the thing is, people talk about what they should have took Stroud. Why? I want you to know why. I'm anxious to know, because the thing is this. Do you really want to see a guy with the potential and the talent of a CJ Stroud down there in Carolina getting beat down with a bad owner and no talent. So the thing is, number one, we thought that we've seen some bad things with Dan Snyder on the field. And Hugh Culverhouse down there in Tampa Bay. Whoo, Lord have mercy. Let me tell you, David Tepper, you right up there with him, brother, because you have disgraced yourself on many occasions, not only on the field, on the product that you put on the field, but in the media and how you conduct yourself. And it's just crazy how certain guys get franchises and they don't know. And like I said, you would have thought that he learned something from the Rooney. Shout out to the Rooney family. There's a Rooney rule for a reason. Shout out to him. You would have thought that he would have learned something while he was up there being a minority owner. But apparently you learned nothing but how to just go into somewhere and just flat out just mess it up. Because the thing is, regardless of the circumstances outside of football, I will say, let me stress that again, outside of football, the last regime was constantly in playoff contention. In fact, they was in the NFC Championship their second year in existence. So they was constantly in contention. They may have had a
Super Bowl appearances.
Yes, multiple Super Bowl appearances, had an MVP in Cam Newton, they went to the playoffs with Kerry Collins. And if you know BRF, you know about Kerry Collins and the rumors surrounding him all the time. So
yeah.
The thing is, they went to playoffs with him before they traded him off to
he wasn't that bad as the QB.
Well, there was some stuff off the field that was going on.
Okay.
You know, a whole lot of other things. But I digress. But the thing was, under that last regime, you had a plethora of Pro Bowl players. You had a lot of talent as far as on the field. Like I say, I do stress on the field, what they were doing was okay. But the thing is, the culture-wise was not very good, as far as work environment, things like that. That's why they were ousted. But it got bad to worse. I mean, like I said, you could put David Tepper right there unless he redeems himself. Because remember, there was a lot of stuff about this, about how Jed York, the owner of the San Francisco 49ers, how he was conducting himself, in the front office, and how he ousted Jim Harbaugh, and how he was running the team before Jim Harbaugh got there. So we've seen a lot of owners that don't really know what they're doing. Plus, he had to take the place of his uncle, who was the previous owner of the team, which, if you know Eddie DeBartolo, Mr. DeBartolo, he was one of the best owners in the league. He was a Hall of Famer for a reason, the first owner to ever get 5 Super Bowls. So it was a lot of stuff about the 49ers before they got themselves together. But for this to happen under your watch, and the thing is, you haven't really owned the team that long. And it's already one of the worst franchises in the league.
7 years he's been owning the team now.
How many years?
7 years. He took ownership of the team back in 2018.
So 3 years after a Super Bowl appearance. 3 years after a Super Bowl appearance, you take over that team from the previous regime because of the circumstances surrounding them getting ousted. And we think because you're coming from Pittsburgh, we're going to get a Pittsburgh type of guy like the Rooney family, one of the best ownership groups in the league. But instead, you're right here throwing deep. I have never seen, the thing is, outside of going to that podium, I ain't never seen Mr. Rooney. I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't see the Rooneys out front doing anything. As far as, I'm talking about being visible owners, I would say.
Right.
I mean, they're the least visible owners and the most successful. That should tell you a lot about ownership, but I digress.
No, you make a very valid point, champ. Make a very valid point. I just want to read the stat. According to Stat News, in the last 10 games with Bryce Young, he has a passer rating of 65.8 with 1,562 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions in his last 10 games in his NFL career.
Oh my God.
Yeah, the numbers are pretty bad, but I do think Bryce Young needs a resurrection and he needs to go elsewhere.